This planet that we live on carries a syphilitic virus of lies and deception. And with every corner turned, that deception stalks us. With its transgender he, she, me, she, you too, me too. It seems existence is an illusion. I am fluid too, liquid to be precise. And if you don't believe me, you are a mental. Lies and manipulation, the dueling blades of the day. Jack. The tales that are about to unfold are those of deception that can only have come from the abyss. Enjoy or not.
And she's very vague about who they were and where they were. And it sounds strange, how could you be with so many families? But I work in the foster care system, and you can be in a home for 3 or 4 days and move to another, then to another. So it's not clear cut.
Meet the Barnett family. And I guess you could say if the world were a shitty diaper, they wanted to change it. And even put talcum powder on its balls. But there are those who'd say that if it's shitty, it's shitty for a reason. And if you try to change it, you're gonna just get your fingers stinky. Meet little orphan Annie. In 2010, the Barnetts invited 6-year-old Ukrainian orphan Natalia into their home to share their family and to spread their love, because I guess they had so much to give. And because Natalia had a rare form of dwarfism and were a cripple, she needed a lot of extra TLC that the Barnetts felt they were willing to give. And although the Ukraine, where this orphan is from, exports some pretty hot strippers and hookers, apparently it's not so nice of a place to live if you're an orphan. You get the point. It's a shithole unless you're a cocksucker. Oh, pardon me. Did I hurt your feelings? Well, this ain't the fucking Disney Channel. You can tell, cause there are no mouse ears on the corner of the screen. Anyhows, so the Barnetts adopted this dwarf orphan. But apparently things got strange right from the get-go. When Mrs. Barnett were bathing the kid, turned out she had a bush. Which was strange for a 6-year-old. But Mrs. Barnett put it down to just something the dwarves have, like stubby fingers. But the Barnetts had other concerns. The kid, considering she were a Ukrainian, didn't even have an accent, much less speak the language. But when the mother found the 6-year-old's underwears and realized that she'd been menstruating, well, she knew that something smelled fishy. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, but I ain't gonna go there, cause this is a family show. So when she confronted the orphan and asked what was going on, the kid calmly answered,
"I'll kill your family."
When Mrs. Barnett voiced her concerns to her loving husband, they decided to take their commie adoptee to the doctors to get to the bottom of these anomalies. And after a series of tests, the physician concluded that the pesky Ukrainian orphan was 6 years old. She was closer to 30. When they tried to contact the people that they bought the kid from, they disappeared, vanished like a midget down a manhole. I guess they should have kept their bill of sale. When they did a little poking around, they found out the nasty little munchkin had been from family to family, and in one case even broke a kid's arm, proving she didn't mind cracking skulls to get her point across. In their quest to become saviors of the world, they had put their non-dwarf family at risk. And although their Eastern Bloc adoptee weren't growing, the family's fears certainly were. For their own safety, they started making calls, and they found out no one knew where their so-called Ukrainian refugee orphan came from. But there's one thing for sure, zip code weren't in the Ukraine. And to make matters worse, Mrs. Barnett felt like she was now being watched by the creepy little critter, and her phone calls listened in on. It was early one morning when she came into the kitchen and caught Natalia pouring bleach into her coffee. And when she questioned the rambunctious little refugee what she were up to, she answered,
I'm trying to kill you and the rest of your family, one by one.
Which is pretty ungrateful considering that she brought her to the free world. So in the middle of the night, while Natalia slept, they packed up the car and her kids, paid 6 months worth of rent, left some cash on the table for food, and headed towards the border of Canada, which I guess is a haven not only for draft dodgers, but also for dwarf dodgers. It was 3 years later of dwarfless bliss that the Barnetts, now separated, discovered that their little problem,
Christine, is there anything you want to say?
No comment.
had become a big problem. Because when they tried to return to the States, they were arrested for child abandonment. The couple, who once felt that they had so much love to give, were now felons. I guess this dwarf bites back.
Place where patriotism is a way of life. You'll find Chicagoans love their city and their country.
It was an unseasonably muggy Chicago morning. You know the type, where you can smell a homeless man's balls 5 minutes before you turn the corner. But I bet 12-year-old Mary Kellerman didn't have a homeless man's balls on her mind as she was getting ready for school. Complaining to her mother that she had a headache, her mother told her to shut up and take a Tylenol before she missed the bus. It was the last advice that Mary Kellerman would ever take. Because 30 seconds after swallowing that capsule, she fell to the floor, started convulsing, with white foam coming out of her mouth. Her eyes rolled into the back of her head. She shit herself, and she died. While 31-year-old Mary McFarland had coffee with co-workers, complaining of a headache, she took a Tylenol, stood up, said she didn't feel well, then fell down, banged her head on the desk, and was dead before she hit the ground. It was only half a mile away. The 27-year-old postal worker, Adam Janis, took 2 extra-strength Tylenol for his aching knee and died while still taking his morning shit.
His brother and sister-in-law were so upset by his death that they went back to the house and took some Tylenol from the same bottle.
It was only 3 hours later that both his brother and his sister-in-law followed him into the abyss. In the next 48 hours, 7 people had mysteriously died almost instantly. It was only when vigilant medical staff realized that all the dead had recently taken extra-strength Tylenol that a citywide warning was put out.
Flush it all down the commode, okay?
There's no single person or even a group of single persons that stand out above the rest at this point in time.
But when investigators found cyanide in the stiffs, but more importantly, in the stiffs' Tylenol, they didn't have a goddamn clue who would have done it. And they started pulling Tylenol off the shelves like retards licking dropped ice creams off the floor.
Scared, really, that somebody could have tampered with some of the other products.
Cyanide contaminated Tylenol.
With cops unsure if it was citywide or nationwide, they pulled every goddamn bottle in the U.S.
All the bottles of extra-strength capsules were removed Friday as part of the nationwide recall. Now, not only is extra-strength Tylenol off the shelves, Tylenol commercials are off the air.
Police are looking for disgruntled employees, angry customers, anybody with a grudge against the stores or Tylenol. Police are even checking stock transactions to see whether someone was trying to push down the value of Johnson & Johnson stock.
But it was the randomness of the crime, the randomness of the death, that shocked the nation.
Tylenol, laced with cyanide, still has not been solved tonight.
Investigators say they are searching for, quote, a madman.
Predict the Tylenol brand name will disappear within a year.
With the manufacturers offering a $100,000 reward, they were hoping they could flush out the killer, like people were flushing their Tylenol. Thousands of leads started pouring in, but they were as useless as a retard with a boner.
A stolen car with Tylenol in it, the body of a man found with Tylenol in a coat pocket. There were reports of a Tylenol shoplifter.
He got there, we said, now where did you get this information? And she says, I have a magic pen, and it made me write these things out, and I've told you about it.
The FBI now had a 130-man task force on the case, working around the clock, and yet they couldn't find a goddamn thing. It was then that the headache capsule manufacturer received an extortion letter.
Authorities today stepped up their search for the man accused of demanding $1 million from the makers of Tylenol to prevent further murders.
A 4-page extortion letter that seemed to tick all the boxes. A letter that warned the painkiller peddler that it better cough up $1 million or the killing would continue. But when the FBI got hold of the letter, with advanced fingerprint techniques, they were able to finger their man. Meet one James Lewis. Wannabe writer, two-bit con man. The only thing that James had going for himself was that cancer ran in his family. And along with his wife, the four-eyed fuckers had a history of trying to get something for nothing. But that don't make a killer. That makes a scumbag extortionist, but it don't make a killer. And the FBI knew that every crime of this magnitude, every copycat and fucking wannabe lecherous scumbag could come forward looking for a handout. And Lewis and his scabby wife were no different. So without a stick of evidence, except for a letter with details that anyone could have got from the newspaper, a judge gave him 20 years for extortion, and the Chicago Tylenol murders remain unsolved.
Welcome aboard Malaysia Air Flight 370. I am your captain.
It's become the greatest aviation mystery of all time. Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370. Takeoff point, Kuala Lumpur Airport, Malaysia. Destination, the Abyss.
Malaysia 370 morning. Malaysia 370 standby.
Both pilots were highly experienced, with the captain alone accumulating almost 3,000 flying hours. There were 12 Malaysian crew members, along with 227 passengers from 14 nations. Their death clock was now ticking. To witnesses who had contact with both the first officer and the captain before the flight, they felt nothing was unusual with their demeanor. They were both friendly and easygoing, as usual.
Oh, radar, good morning. Climb flight level 250. Morning, level 250, Malaysian 370. Malaysian 370, climb flight level 350. Level 350, Malaysian 370.
The air traffic controller tells the captain to contact Ho Chi Minh airstrip because they're about to enter Vietnamese airspace, and then says goodnight.
Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. Good night, Malaysian 370.
And that is the last human contact with Malaysian flight MH370. 43 seconds later, the plane disappears from radar. The technique of tracking the aircraft are by the two transponders on board that either have to both cease functioning or to be manually turned off. At this point, all attempts to contact the aircraft fail, and when it misses its scheduled landing in Beijing, China, 4 hours later, the aircraft is officially pronounced missing. The most expensive search and rescue operation in aviation history is about to commence. The initial search area was the South Sea of China, where contact was lost with the aircraft, but it was the Malaysian military whose tracking system was based on reflectance and not the aircraft's transponders. They reported that a minute and 35 seconds after the transponders had been turned off, the aircraft made a sharp left turn and doubled back over the Malaysian island of Penang, and coincidentally, the birthplace of the captain. Then the aircraft maintained a northwesterly heading before being lost by the military's radar, which experts now believe this to be intentional. Like all modern passenger aircraft, Flight 370 was equipped with a satellite communications terminal, or SATCOM, that sends and receives transmissions to the ground and to the aircraft, where it established a connection with a ground station in Perth, Australia. This call and response form of communication, although it can't pinpoint an aircraft's location, it does show that it's in the air and in one piece and still transmitting wherever it is. Experts believe that the aircraft made a controlled landing somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean, and wreckage found confirms this theory. It's also believed that the plane may have remained afloat for up to an hour. Yeah, sure, there's been a lot of theories on what happened in that cockpit, but most of them are based on not wanting to hurt anybody's feelings. Most credible investigators believe that the captain waited for his co-pilot to leave the cabin, then he locked them out, decompressurized the plane, killing everybody on board. Why? On the day of the flight, the captain's hero, the leader of his political party, was sent to jail for ass fucking, and the captain had even attended the trial. And like most psychopaths, he decided doing it on his own wasn't good enough. Unfortunately, there are those who feel this conclusion is based on religion, opposed to common sense and evidence. I mean, when have we ever let religion cloud our judgment? But there's one thing for certain. Anybody on that flight who booked a return ticket were wasting their money. That book says no more.
Legion forever!